Hi, welcome to Jeremy Pryor's podcast, or what I like to call Jeremy Pryor Unfiltered. I'm his daughter and producer, Kelsey Gall, and we are excited to bring you seasons of content all the way from Tolkien to theology, from business to family. If you like to contemplate deep philosophical ideas across a wide range of topics, you've come to the right place. Make sure you give us a follow so you don't miss out on future episodes.
Awesome, guys. Welcome back to my podcast. I'm here with my lovely wife, April. We are watching this on YouTube. Where are we, April?
We are on Whidbey Island, which is an island off the coast of Seattle.
Yeah, it's so gorgeous here right now. We both are, you can see from our backdrops, in the middle of Douglas fir forest. Those are not fake backdrops.
This is a real background.
So we're here for 3 weeks, hanging out, doing a ministry where we do kind of a boot camp for high school kids, 20 high school kids. And we like to lead this from time to time. So yeah, I wanted to talk through the next part of the book with you guys. This is actually the beginning of chapter 2. We're going to start diving into Adam and Eve, the co-founders of the first household. And so this particular article is A Household Begins with Rest. So I'm going to read this to you guys, and then April, get your reaction. In Genesis 2, we read, "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation." As we begin our Sabbath each Friday night, a question I frequently ask our kids is, what was the first thing God directed humanity to do after creating them on the sixth day? The answer: he commanded them to rest. And what does that teach us, I ask? That we don't rest from work, we work from rest. This is the embodiment of the gospel. Throughout the New Testament, we're taught to have faith, to trust, not in our work, but in the work Jesus has already done for us. But how do we learn that? The answer is simple. Once a week, we stop working and we rest. We put the full weight of our trust not in our work, but in his work. This changes the way we work. Our work is not done in a desperate attempt to justify our existence or in fear that we'll never have enough, never be enough. Our work is done out of gratitude for what has already been done for us. What does this have to do with building a household? Everything. I'm often asked, what is the one thing a family can do from being a group of individuals to becoming a multi-generational team? My answer is always simply rest. Rest together. Build the skill of the Sabbath. This roots your family in the gospel and in the family at the same time. And so it's no surprise that after God created the first family, he rests with his creation. He sits back like a master artist and enjoys the beauty of what he has been made. Within the Protestant tradition, the history of Sabbath keeping has often not been a powerful tool for family building. If you ask most children who grew up keeping the Sabbath, how they would describe that day, it's often as their least favorite day of the week. It was the day when they heard the word no more than any other. It was a day of sheer boredom. And since the Sabbath is a kind of rehearsal for entering God's eternal rest, it's not surprising that many children of this strict observance find it difficult to look forward to the fullness of Christ's coming kingdom. There are simple ways to overcome this deficient practice. And here we're going to describe the first tool in building a household, the skill of Sabbath keeping. All right, so we're going to dive into the skill of Sabbath keeping. The verse here, Exodus 12, 26 and 27. "And when your children ask you, 'What does this ceremony mean to you?' then tell them." And this is, of course, about the Passover, but this is a really big part of any time you do a ceremony with your kids. "If you want to build a healthy household rooted in the gospel, keep the Sabbath. If you want to build a multi-generational family, kick every Sabbath off with a special family meal. And if you develop the skill of this meal, you will not be able to stop a multi-generational family from emerging naturally from your house." The problem is most Western Christian fathers have never been trained in the skill of leadership at the family table. It's not enough to take a day of rest if you don't lead your family into the meaning of that rest through the story of the gospel. This is why the kickoff meal is so crucial. A father must stand in front of his family and explain through dialogue with his children what the Sabbath means and why we keep it. And keep in mind, we do not keep the Sabbath out of any legal obligation. Read Colossians 2:16. This is a tool in the toolbox of a family that they can choose to use or not, because I've never found a more effective tool at constructing the kind of household God has called us to build. Later, we'll talk about the larger topic of Sabbath keeping, but the Sabbath kickoff meal is a tool all on its own. There are 3 elements that make this meal so useful. Number 1, identity. You must help each family member inhabit their family identity. The father must feel like a father, a mother like a mother, a son like a son, and a daughter like a daughter. We do this by giving each of these identities a role in the pre-dinner drama. The father initiates. He tells the story of the gospel and blesses his sons. The mother blesses the Sabbath, lighting the candles, blessing the daughters. The son receives the blessing from the father, and the daughters receive the blessing from the mother. Number 2, family storytelling. After the food and wine are flowing and everyone is relaxed, it's time for an all-table conversation. We found it helpful to use simple prompts like date prompts. Is it someone's birthday? Tell stories about that person or things you appreciate about him or her. Keep a family calendar of dates of family members who have passed and remember them as well on their birthdays. Pictures, memories, and any story that helps keep the family rooted in where we've come from and who we are. Another one is seasonal prompts. Holidays and the changing seasons are a great time to remember what life was like. If you're fortunate enough to have grandparents at your Sabbath table, have them share what life was like for them during these seasons, during their childhood. What was Christmas like? Summertime, school starting, the 4th of July, the winter. Children who hear these kinds of stories from parents and grandparents begin to get a deep sense of who we are as a family, as their roots reach down into rich soil. Circumstantial prompts. What is going on in the world? Is there an election? An international conflict? Did we just buy a new car? Did someone just break their arm? Dig into the family archive and gain wisdom from what the eldest family members can remember about these events and how they reflect on the meaning of those events now as they've had the benefit of the years to consider how best to think about these things. All right, so number 1, identity. Number 2, family storytelling. Number 3, timelessness. Learn how to linger together. This is the main reason I like this meal being in the evening. In Genesis, the day began in the evening. There was evening and there was morning the first day. Learn to stay up late together, play games, talk about the week, eat dessert, have fun. You're inside the Sabbath. Enjoy it together. Call the Sabbath a delight. Isaiah 58:13 says that. As you get more skilled and more consistent at kicking off the Sabbath, you'll notice a transformation beginning to happen to your family. You, your spouse, your children, and any extended family who join the festivities will develop deep family identities. They will discover a critical aspect of who they are, and they'll need every bit of that family identity for what's ahead. Okay, so that's the beginning of chapter 2 in the book I'm writing called The Ruling Household. Really important practice. I've just shocked continually at how foundational this practice is, and it just blows my mind that it's right there in the beginning of Genesis. So yeah, April, what does this stir up for you?
Yeah, it resonates with me. There were lots of different parts of that I was thinking of examples from. It's hard to know which one to kind of go down, but I think to start off by saying, for us personally, this has been a very long process for us to figure out how to do this, how to have a day of rest that's kicked off by a meal that we share together as a family. It's looked very different for us in the different seasons, whether our kids were little or whether we were, moving or traveling, whether or not we just had another kid, like all those things. So we have been trying to do Sabbath kickoff meal, I would say probably about 18 years or so. And so we've had lots of different iterations. And as new children are born into it, one thing that is just really crazy to think about is our kids, for the most part, won't be able to remember a time when they didn't have a kickoff Sabbath meal. And so I'm just curious what that's going to look like 10, 15 years from now for them, what that is going to mean to them. So curious about that. But so this article that Jeremy just read, or that's going to be part of the book, is very kind of describes the big picture. And I think sometimes people want to know the practical of what this looks like and how to do it. And so we just encourage you to pick like a day of the week that you're going to have as your day of rest. For us, it was Sundays, and then for a good amount of time, and then significantly changed to Saturday being our day of rest. So then our kickoff dinner would happen on Friday nights. And that's the way it's been for a long time for us, probably for the last 10, 12 years. So then we kind of like let that meal kind of be the center of our week in terms of like how we plan up to it, and then rest and reflect on it, and then plan for the next one, and then rest and reflect. And it's kind of like the anchor for our week. That's what it's become. It wasn't like that always. And then we just try to make it like a special meal in some form or fashion. So the idea of putting on a big fancy dinner when the kids were little was not my cup of tea. It felt like very overwhelming and another thing I had to do. And I'm not super, being in the kitchen isn't like my super favorite. Like it doesn't come to me very naturally. I have to work really hard at it. And so that we had to figure out how to do that really simply for my sake. Because back then Jeremy wasn't helping out in the kitchen very much. And he is now, and it's like completely different experience. But so then we set apart the meal somehow. So like we have different plates, or we use a tablecloth, which we don't use a tablecloth the rest of the week. We have a special candle that we light that's like the smell of Sabbath. When you have little kids, it's so great to like have a scent, like try to have all the senses engaged in this idea of the Sabbath. And so for us, we have a candle that has a smell to it, that it's like the smell of rest in our house. But maybe you're hearing like, wait, what? Like grandparents sharing and storytelling and this just like what? That's crazy. But some people need to work up to that. And some people are in the place where that just kind of makes sense. Like, oh yeah, my grandparents live 20 minutes away. I could probably invite them, or my parents, and we could invite them. And anyway, so just it can feel really overwhelming, but there are really simple ways to do it. And just adding like one element that makes this meal different somehow. And I love how we're able to, I think we've been able to do this for a long time, even when the kids were little, is to like extend dinner into the evening. So not necessarily like we're still eating, but we might still be hanging around the table. And then the cleanup might be kind of slow. And then we're like onto a game or that we're all playing or something like that, some way that we stay engaged throughout the whole night. Instead of like, okay, dinner's over, push your chair back, clear the table, and off everyone splits up to go do their own thing. It's a night we try to like stay together as a family.
The Family Plan Calendar is the new way to keep your family team organized. Plan your rhythms, menu, household chores, and notes for the family all in one place. Visit familyteams.com to purchase. Like what you hear? Be sure to leave a rating and review for this podcast wherever you use streaming.
Yeah, it's just, it's really important that you experience your family-ness. And so that kind of timeless lingering that you get to, and that is something you have to let yourself practice your way into. But when we talk about becoming a family team, really experiencing multi-generational family, doing this once a year at Christmas or Thanksgiving is just not enough, you guys. And a lot of times, we joke about how miserable some of those meals are with extended family members because we're so out of practice. And I used to think, oh, that's just the way extended family is. It's just miserable or something. Apparently people joke about it constantly. And then when you're in Israel and you see everyone just fleeing to their parents' house, like they want to be there, and they're taking their little kids, and everyone's going to Saba and Safta's house, that's the grandma and grandpa, for their Sabbath dinner. It's clear that part of the reason why those relationships are so healthy, and it is still fun to spend the one night a week when everyone is free with family in that culture in the Middle East. It's because they have a lot of practice at this. They've been doing this, their whole life. And so much of what is broken about multi-generational family and extended family relationships really comes from just a lack of any practice of being around each other and experiencing really, really epic peak moments and crafting those moments with good food and thoughtful leadership, And so, one thing that's on the big picture side that really kind of surprised me, I would say, is that this book, The Ruling Household, I'm really attempting to kind of survey the whole Bible. This is kind of the project I'm kind of embarking on. I just want to go through the whole Bible in sort of the order of the books of the Bible, and really investigate all of the tools and all of the examples of multi-generational family throughout Scripture. And you open to the very, very first page, and the first tool that you're given is the Sabbath. And ironically, for years, as people have asked me, like, what's the one thing you would recommend people do to start a multi-generational family? I would say, guys, if you can keep a Sabbath and kick it off with a meal, you won't be able to stop a multi-generational family from coming from your line if you do that really well, consistently. And so, and it's both fun and meaningful, but also so effective at creating a multi-generational family team culture. And it's right there at the very, very, very beginning of the Bible. So it was like, as I was began to write this book and begin the process of surveying all the tools, it was right there at the beginning. And that is not an accident. And we have somehow, I think within Christianity, relegated Sabbath keeping to some kind of law-based, legalistic on one hand, or maybe Jewish on the other. And it kind of leaves most Protestants, at least, with very little interest in how to keep this part of our faith. And I think that has directly resulted in the weakening of the family. And so that's why we're starting here. I don't think it's a law that we're commanded to keep in a particular way. I think it's a tool that is so valuable, and it's almost difficult to overstate the impact this has on the culture of the family.
Yes, I agree with that. I think that when your kids are little, then they have this whole day set aside to just get to play together. And maybe it's like this extended playtime that they aren't expecting, that they might not have throughout the rest of the week. I know as our kids got into like the teen years, our oldest got them all into this mystery, like a mystery subscription box. So it would come, and they would, every day of rest, they would be so excited because they could work on the next whatever, like mystery that had to be solved. And that was just a really fun time for them. And they did, like, our oldest initiated that, and they all responded, and they all had, so your kids are bonding as well. And then I think also, as our kids got older and weren't completely dependent on me for every thing, I was able to focus a little bit on myself on those days. And it has been amazing. It's probably one of the most impactful practices for my personal discipleship is having a day of rest. And the reason is because it's very hard for me to rest. And when I really drill down to the root of why it's hard for me to rest, it's a lot of yuck. And so, self-reliance, telling God, it's good. I'm good, God. I've got this. I can do it. I've got it all on my own, which obviously I don't, but somehow convinced myself way down deep that I did and do. And so having this space and the time, it's like one rabbi called Shabbat the cathedral of time. So you go into this place, it's like a portal where time doesn't pass the way it does on other days somehow. And so I'm able to have these times with the Lord where he's just like really working on me and helping me understand how much resting increases our trust in him. So we're resting, and as you're like the provider for the household, like Jeremy is, or the one who's like meeting so many needs throughout the week, to kind of put my hands up and be like, okay, I'm not as needed as I think I am, or it's actually all up to you, God. Oh, my righteousness is as filthy rags. Like all of those things that he's used the day of rest to be like, trust me. I got this. And we see that all through the Old Testament when the Israelites were wandering through the wilderness, and he gave them food all throughout the week and gave them a double portion of food to gather on the day before the day of rest came, because he was saying, trust me, I've got you. You're going to have enough food for these 2 days. And the way he practically did that, with the bread getting maggots if they kept it too long or gathered too much, or, everyone had just enough. It was such a trust game. He just is not game, but like a trust building exercise. He just is wooing us ever since the garden, when we chose not to trust him. He just continues to woo us into relationship with him. And I feel like having a weekly time to practice that rest and trust in him has really, really shaped me spiritually.
Yeah, I think it's good to kind of end there. We really want to encourage you guys to understand that this is how you bring your entire family into belief in the gospel. And April and I both kind of believed originally that the gospel is something you receive and trust once, and then you're saved, past tense. And we've been really discipled by many, many theologians into the reality that the New Testament really describes as just the beginning of a trust journey. And yeah, it's great to be saved in terms of maybe your eternal destiny, but you really, the gospel is not what saved you, but what saves you. And you want to embody that. You want to experience that. You want to experience that trust, and to stop working for 24 hours and say that, I don't control the world. I trust the one who does. And for your children to see you do that, and for you to lead them into that is allowing you to live out an embodiment of the gospel, so that all of your souls are saved in that kind of continually being sanctified sense that I'm using the word. And so I think this is a really important practice. How else are we going to practically live into our sanctification than to stop working and start trusting? And it's a beautiful way to disciple your family and to really make spiritual leadership through rest and through these conversations around the meaning for why we're taking this time. That's really going to transform your family in beautiful ways. So I want to encourage you guys to do that. And the ruling household, I think, does start here. Like, this is the first practice. And it's kind of ironic if you think about, I mean, I think most people say, oh, ruling household, first practice must be to do something to exert your dominance. And it's like, no, the first practice is to exert your dependence through rest, through trust. This is where it starts. And this is the counterintuitive way in which the gospel works. And so we want to encourage you guys to really lean in, live into the gospel this way, if you haven't. And for those of you guys who are practicing a Sabbath, to continue to develop this in a way where the gospel is the center and where you're leading your family into a state of trust. And we're constantly trying to figure that out, how to do that better as a family. Sometimes I think Sabbath can become a little bit too fleshy, where we aren't necessarily emphasizing the spiritual components of the Sabbath. And that's why these kickoff dinners can be really strategic for making sure that our hearts and minds are properly primed for why we're doing this, and to make this an experience of the gospel, not just a thing for our bodies, but for our souls. So that's what we're doing. If you guys want a lot of details in terms of how to do this, you got lots of questions about how to do this with littles, or we did a 7-part podcast on family teams where we interviewed a lot of different families who've been practicing this for a long time with various stages and lots of insights on how to do that. We interviewed the Bethkeys, we interviewed our friends, the Allsmiths. We did pretty deep dive. So check out that 7-part series over there. But we also want to begin this conversation about what it means to be a ruling household with, hey, it starts here. It starts with rest and trust in the gospel. Thanks, April, for doing this convo with me today.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to Jeremy Pryor's podcast. Make sure you hit that follow button so you don't miss out on any future content. Follow Jeremy on Twitter and Instagram, as well as his Substack blog, all linked in the description. See you next time.